everyone, this is Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Today's video is stitch number 8 in our year-long crochet along the Harmony sample blanket. Now just to repeat what we've already done for the last 7 months, we did the granny stitch, we did a V-stitch, we did a cross stitch, and a bobble stitch. We did a simple shell, a block stitch, and last month we did the basket weave. What we're going to be doing today is called the seed stitch, and basically you're alternating double crochets and single crochets for a really interesting texture. Now, if you want all the stitches that we've already covered through the year, just click that link that's down in the notes underneath the video, and it will take you to the page that has all the stitches, all the blogs, and all the videos, including this one. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that if you added stitches to make your blanket wider, you're going to need to remember to continue to add those stitches. That if you're doing the blanket according to what I have written out, you will always have the 74 stitches across. All right, we're going to be starting on row 28 according to the pattern. And also remember that if you added more rows of each stitch, that your row count will be different. We've been using worsted weight number 4 yarns that we have on hand. I've been using a combination of Red Heart Super Saver for mine, all in solids, and you need to stay with the same type yarn. Don't add cotton or a blend, or when you wash it, it's going to shrink in some places and maybe stretch in others. Just some simple reminders. We're stitching the blanket using an H hook, which is a 5.00 millimeter crochet hook. And if you used a different size for your previous rows, make sure you stick with that same size crochet hook. You'll also need your scissors, and you'll need a needle for weaving in the ends. For what I'm going to do today, I'm going to be using 3 different colors of yarn. I'm going to start with brown. I'm going to switch to this cream, and then I'm also going to use this sort of a rose color. And what I'm doing is I'm sticking with solids, but I'm also using up some of my yarn scraps that I have left over from previous projects. All right, so gather up your yarns and we'll get started learning how to stitch the seed stitch. Now we have weaved in the ends from our previous section of stitches where we did the basket weave, but we left our last loop, and that is so that we have a place to join in our next color of yarn. And in between each section of stitches, we always have a row of stitches just to separate, sometimes single crochet, sometimes double, and today we're going to be doing a row of single crochet. So I'm just going to do that in this brown color. I'm going to bring in that loop. There we go. And I'm just going to place a single crochet in each stitch across. And this is just our divider row. And also, as you go, make sure that you have the right number of stitches for your row. If you have one too many or one less, you can always do a decrease or increase to get you back on track. And I'll explain that to you at the end of this row. So I'm stitching 1 single crochet in each of the stitches across to get me all set up for our next row where we're going to learn the seed stitch. All right, I have completed a row of single crochet. And let me just give you a couple of tips. If you're off by one, you can always add a second single crochet in this last stitch. It's not going to matter too much just to add one extra stitch to get you back on track. If you have one too many, let's say you have 75 instead of 74, you can always do the last two together. And this will help you decrease by one. That's stitching them together. Now, I don't recommend if you're off by more than one or two to do it this way. That's just a little tip to help get you back on track if you're off by one. All right, so I'm going to switch colors. So I'm going to cut this brown yarn off and remove that from my yarn bowl. And I'm going to bring in this cream color. There we go. All right, let's learn how to do the seed stitch. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch 4 single crochets, one in each of the first 4 single crochets. And this just gives our blanket an edge to work with. All right, so there's those first 4 single crochets. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch a double crochet in the next stitch. Then we're going to stitch a single crochet in the next stitch. And basically what stitching the seed stitch is double, single, double, single. So I'm stitching a double, then I'm stitching a single. The next stitch is a double. The next stitch is a single. And I know right now it doesn't look all that fantastic, but when we get the next rows on, you're going to see how neat it is and how fun the little texture is. And this makes a really great stitch for lots of different things like hats and gloves and different things like that. So, whoops, single crochet, double crochet, single crochet, double crochet, and we'll repeat this all the way across till we reach those last 4 double crochets. All right, so I have finished my row across. I'm to those last 4 stitches, and your last stitch here should be a double crochet, and then we're going to put a single in those last 4 stitches. We're going to chain 1 and turn. We chained 1 and turned our work. We're going to place 1 single crochet in those first 4 stitches. We're going to be continuing the double, single pattern across. The main thing that we need to look for is that we're stitching our single crochets in a double crochet stitch. There's my first one. Next, I'm going to stitch a double crochet in the single crochet stitch. This way it keeps the pattern the way that it should look. So we're still stitching single, double. We're just putting them in the opposite of what we're stitching. Here's a double crochet. I'm stitching a single. The next stitch is a single, so I'm stitching a double. And we'll repeat this all the way across this row. And I think you'll begin to see the pattern that's forming that makes a really neat, just a little bit of a texture pattern. Single, double, single, double, all the way across, making sure again that we're stitching our single crochets in double crochets and our double crochets in single crochets. I completed this row across till the last 4 stitches, and I'm just going to place a single crochet in the last 4 stitches. And I'm going to change colors. So I'm going to cut my yarn. I'm going to bring in this kind of a rosy brown color. Chain 1 and turn my work. Now remember, when you're changing colors, do your color change before your chain 1 so you don't have that little bump of color on the next row. I changed my color, I chained 1, and now I'm going to stitch 1 single crochet in the first 4 stitches. Now we're going to repeat the pattern that we've been doing, and so you see the first stitch here is a single crochet, so I'm going to stitch a double crochet. Whether you added stitches to make it wider or not, you need to make sure that you're stitching your double crochets in your singles and your single crochets in your doubles. Single, double, single, double. And I wanted to change color so that you can see how that looks up next to the next color. All right, so I'm just going to continue this across, stitching a single in the doubles and a double in the singles, just like we did on the previous row. And then I'm going to stitch a second row so you can see what it looks like with 2 rows of each color. So we're going to repeat the single double with 4 single crochets at the beginning and the end for 2 more rows. I completed those 2 rows so that you can see that nice texture stitch that's made just by alternating single crochets and double crochets. All right, so the last thing we need to do is cut our yarn. Now, I always take the last loop and do a chain 1 and snug that with the loop nice and big, because we're not going to weave this one in. However, I do go ahead and weave these ends in so I don't have to deal with that later. So each month when I do a new stitch, I go ahead and weave the end in. And I try to go through stitches and I go in. Sometimes I'll turn and go back, but I try to never leave my yarn sticking out this way. Just bring it back in there. I rethread that because it came off. So that I'm pulling it in this direction to cut it. That way I don't have any ends sticking out. Let me do this other one so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm try to stay within the color, so I'm going to go in this brown. I'm going to go up a couple stitches, that white one out of the way. And then I'm going to go back. Now, That would probably hold, but I don't want the end of my yarn out towards the end, just in case it gets fuzzy. Or, you know, it's not neat. We are going to be putting a trim, but just in case, just to be neat and tidy, I'll come this way and then I'll clip that end. And that's how I like to do the weaving in of the ends. Don't weave in your last loop though, because we're going to need that when we do next month's stitch. And that's how you do the seed stitch.